72 hours. That is the exact unforgiving ticking clock before your internal organs begin to shut down and fail completely. Imagine standing in the middle of a sprawling modern metropolis, surrounded by millions of people, yet you are slowly, agonizingly dying of thirst. This is the invisible daily reality for millions of homeless individuals who survive for years on the harsh concrete streets. How do they defy the strict biological limits of the human body? Where exactly is the safe drinking water coming from that nobody in mainstream society is talking about? Look closely into the shadows of an abandoned alleyway. There you will find Elias, a hardened 60-year-old veteran whose weathered face and faded green army jacket blend perfectly into the city grime. Right now, Elias is holding a rusted, battered coffee can over a hidden, flickering fire. He is executing the oldest, most vital survival trick in human history: boiling water. It sounds incredibly rudimentary, but honestly, this primitive method still works far better than most fancy, overpriced gadgets you would buy at a premium outdoor store. Here is the undeniable scientific truth that keeps these urban survivors alive. Just 60 seconds of a rolling, aggressive boil violently eradicates 99.9% of lethal bacteria, viruses, and deadly parasites. One single minute stands between a man and a week of life-threatening, debilitating dysentery. It is a brilliant, necessary trade-off that saves lives every single day on the unforgiving pavement. But here is the harsh, unspoken reality that nobody tells you about boiling water when you are completely off the grid. Finding a muddy puddle or a polluted creek is rarely the hardest part of the mission. The true nightmare is finding scavenged fuel and a completely safe, concealed place to make a fire without the police immediately showing up to shut you down. You cannot exactly light a blazing campfire behind a corporate supermarket and expect a warm, friendly welcome from the security guards. So, what do resourceful urban survivors actually use to stay hydrated in this concrete jungle? They engineer brilliant solutions from discarded metal cans, old thick pots pulled straight from restaurant dumpsters, or absolutely anything that holds liquid and will not melt over an open flame. I have personally seen men in Elias's camp use heavily dented containers that looked like they had survived 3 world wars, yet they still functioned flawlessly. However, once the water is successfully boiled, the deadly, frustrating waiting game begins. This is precisely where inexperienced people make a fatal amateur mistake. Boiled water must cool down completely before you can safely drink it without scalding your throat and causing severe internal damage. We are talking about a minimum of 30 agonizing minutes of waiting while your throat burns with thirst. And during that unprotected time frame, your freshly purified water is just sitting there, fully exposed to the heavily polluted city air. It actively collects toxic dust, vehicle smog, and whatever microscopic filth floats by in the urban wind. Recontamination is a very real, constant threat that ruins the entire grueling effort. Some of the larger, more organized homeless encampments got incredibly smart about handling this specific vulnerability. They actually designate a dedicated firekeeper for their entire underground community. This is one trusted individual who maintains hot, glowing coals throughout the entire day, essentially running a makeshift water treatment plant under a highway overpass. But suddenly, Elias points out a massive, terrifying catch to this entire boiling process that most people blindly ignore. Boiling handles the living, biological threats perfectly. The bacteria are completely dead. The viruses are absolutely gone. But what happens when you boil water heavily tainted with lead from century-old pipes, or toxic pesticides washing off a manicured lawn into a city drainage creek? Boiling does absolutely nothing to stop chemical contaminants. In fact, those harsh, silent killers just laugh at your little fire, remaining right there in your cup, quietly waiting to poison your system. Boiling is only step 1 of a much larger, more dangerous battle. If fire cannot destroy the toxic chemicals, how do street engineers purify the poison out of their daily water? The mind-blowing answer lies hidden inside a pile of literal garbage, and it is a 200 IQ trick you need to see to believe. Elias steps away from the smoking embers and moves toward a graffiti-covered dumpster. To the average citizen, this is just a pile of worthless urban decay, but to a hardened street survivor, this is an endless hardware store. He is about to construct a fully functional $0 water treatment plant using nothing but literal garbage. Homeless individuals do not just survive the streets, They act as genius engineers in the face of absolute desperation. The setup Elias uses is incredibly simple, yet scientifically flawless. He retrieves a clear plastic 2-liter soda bottle from a recycling bin. With a swift motion of his pocket knife, he slices the bottom off and flips it completely upside down. Then, the meticulous, life-saving layering process begins. First goes a handful of coarse gravel gathered from nearby railroad tracks. Next is a thick layer of fine construction sand stolen from a local building site. Finally, the most critical active ingredient is added to the makeshift funnel. It is crushed black charcoal, scavenged from an abandoned park fire pit or leftover barbecue briquettes. Elias carefully pours the murky, foul-smelling street water into the wide top of the bottle. Miraculously, a slow, steady drip of visibly clearer water begins to emerge from the bottom nozzle. That crushed charcoal layer is doing some serious, heavy lifting to protect his internal organs. Activated charcoal acts like a powerful chemical magnet. It violently absorbs toxic chlorine, deadly pesticides, and all those unpronounceable urban compounds. It removes the specific chemicals that make city runoff taste like a public swimming pool mixed with a dirty parking lot. This is not just some desperate, unproven street hack. Massive, multi-billion-dollar municipal water treatment plants rely on this exact same scientific principle every single day. They just utilize polished stainless steel equipment instead of a thrown-away plastic bottle. But Elias quickly raises a weathered finger, issuing a stern life-or-death warning. This is the fatal mistake that most amateur preppers and weekend campers completely miss. This genius trash filter does not actually kill anything living. It aggressively improves the taste, strips out the dangerous chemical particles, and makes dark water look deceptively pure. However, the microscopic bacteria and lethal viruses are still swimming inside, just waiting to attack your immune system. Therefore, the golden, unbreakable rule of the streets is to filter first and then aggressively boil. It is a mandatory 2-step survival dance that you can never afford to skip. But before that toxic water even touches the plastic bottle system, there is a crucial pre-filter stage. Experienced street survivors will always run the dirty water through a clean scrap of an old cotton t-shirt first. This incredibly simple fabric barrier catches the dead leaves, struggling bugs, and the chunky, stomach-turning sludge. Elias calls it getting the big, ugly threats out of the way before the real science begins. One of these homemade survival filters can process roughly 15 to 20 gallons of water before the charcoal becomes completely saturated and useless. After that limit is reached, you simply dump the toxic contents and rebuild it from scratch. The entire life-saving system costs absolutely $0 to maintain. Every single component naturally exists in the shadows of any major urban environment. It may not yield crystal-clear mountain spring water, but it is dramatically better. Often, this simple trash filter forms the thin, fragile line between staying healthy and fighting for your life in a crowded emergency room. Yet, what if you do not have the time to build a filter or the ability to risk making a visible fire? There is another, nearly effortless purification method that requires absolutely no fuel, no charcoal, and no physical labor at all. The secret weapon is currently hanging right above your head, completely free of charge. But making it work requires a very specific, unforgiving set of rules. Elias points a calloused, dirt-stained finger directly up at the blistering sun beating down on the cracked concrete. He calls it the ultimate, completely free purification machine, hanging right there in the sky. This brilliant survival method requires zero physical exertion, no dangerous open fires, and absolutely no complex scavenged supplies. All you truly need is immense patience and one single item found in literally every trash can on Earth: a discarded, completely clear plastic bottle. When this clear bottle is filled with questionable street water and left baking in direct, intense sunlight for 6 grueling hours, a silent microscopic war begins. The brutal ultraviolet rays from the sun pierce directly through the plastic and aggressively attack the DNA of bacteria and deadly viruses. This invisible radiation completely shatters their genetic code, rendering them paralyzed and entirely unable to reproduce inside your fragile stomach. If you think this sounds like some crazy, unproven street myth, you need to think again. The World Health Organization officially relies on this exact technique, classifying it as solar water disinfection, or SODIS for short. Top scientists have rigorously studied this for decades, proving that it works with lethal, undeniable efficiency. But Elias warns that the streets do not forgive ignorance, and there is a massive critical catch to this entire solar operation. The plastic bottle must be flawlessly, crystal clear. If you mistakenly use a green soda bottle, a brown-tinted container, or heavily scratched plastic, the entire system fails catastrophically. Furthermore, the water inside must also be relatively transparent to begin with. If the liquid is thick with dark mud or sludge, those vital UV rays simply cannot penetrate deep enough to execute the lurking pathogens. Light cannot purify what it cannot physically reach. This is precisely why homeless populations surviving the brutal, scorching environments of Arizona or California absolutely swear by this technique. With over 300 days of relentless sunshine a year, their harsh environment naturally provides a massive, continuous water treatment plant. However, Elias knows a brilliant 200 IQ survival trick to drastically speed up this slow, agonizing process. He strategically places his clear bottles directly on highly reflective surfaces, like abandoned car hoods, discarded metal sheets, or scavenged aluminum foil. This clever, calculated tactic creates a deadly, inescapable crossfire of radiation. The intense reflection blasts UV exposure from below, while the scorching sun simultaneously attacks from above. It is a brilliant double assault that cuts the necessary purification time completely in half. There is a dark, twisted irony hidden in this specific survival tactic. The exact same blazing sun that causes fatal heat stroke and brutal dehydration on the streets also provides the safest, cleanest drinking water. Nature always has a cruel yet fascinating sense of humor for those living on the absolute edge. Yet a terrifying problem still remains completely unsolved in this concrete wilderness. Just like the boiling method, this solar trick only slaughters the living biological nightmares. It does absolutely nothing to erase the heavy lead, the toxic pesticides, or the dangerous industrial runoff poisoning the city drains. After 6 hours of intense sunbathing, those silent chemical killers are still floating right there in the bottle, waiting to destroy your internal organs. So, how do the most elite, hardened urban survivors completely erase every single trace of biological and chemical poison from their water? The answer involves the absolute nuclear option of water purification. A fascinating, complex process that most people have never even heard of. To completely erase every single trace of biological and chemical poison, Elias relies on the absolute nuclear option of water purification. It is a fascinating, complex process known as distillation. This brilliant method literally separates pure, life-saving water molecules from toxic urban sludge by turning liquid into steam and then back into liquid. Whatever heavy metals, pesticides, or toxic garbage was in that foul water simply stays behind in the dirt. The most primitive version of this technique requires zero electricity and zero fire. Elias demonstrates this by digging a shallow hole in the sun-baked earth roughly 18 inches deep. He carefully places a single, clean cup directly in the center of the dark pit. Then, he pours the sketchy, contaminated liquid onto the dirt surrounding the cup, being incredibly careful not to splash a single drop inside. He stretches a piece of clear plastic tightly over the hole, sealing the edges with heavy dirt. Finally, he places a small, heavy rock right in the middle of the plastic, creating a sharp dip pointing straight down at the empty cup. The science behind this survival trap is nothing short of miraculous. The blistering sun intensely heats the damp, contaminated ground inside the sealed pit. The dirty water slowly evaporates into pure, invisible steam. That rising steam hits the cooler plastic sheet, condenses into heavy droplets, and rolls down the dip straight into his waiting cup. It is an agonizingly slow process, producing maybe 1 or 2 precious cups per hour under perfect, cloudless conditions. But for highly contaminated water that absolutely no other method can fix, it is worth every single second of waiting. When Elias needs clean water faster, he builds a brilliant fire-based still using 2 discarded coffee cans and a scavenged piece of copper tubing. He boils the toxic water in the first sealed can, forcing the pure steam through the metal pipe into the second can. The second container is packed tightly with cold mud or ice to rapidly accelerate the condensation process. In the freezing, brutal winters, he employs an entirely different genius tactic known as freeze distillation. When heavily contaminated water freezes in the dead of winter, the pure water crystallizes into solid ice first. The toxic chemicals remain concentrated in the unfrozen, slushy liquid left behind. He simply scrapes off the pure ice, melts it down over a small flame, and drinks safely. Nature has been performing this exact microscopic miracle for millions of years. However, as brilliant as these wilderness methods are, they remain desperate backup plans for a hardened urban survivor. Elias is not digging solar stills or building copper pipe contraptions every single day on the harsh concrete streets. Instead, he utilizes a far more accessible, invisible network hiding in plain sight across corporate America. There is heavily treated, highly regulated municipal water flowing endlessly through every single gas station and fast food joint in the city. The bathroom sink at a local burger chain delivers the exact same high-quality drinking water as a $1 million suburban kitchen faucet. Relying on this modern infrastructure is not an act of desperation. It is an act of pure, calculated efficiency. But massive corporate businesses have gotten incredibly creative and ruthless about limiting this free public access. Those modern, automatic motion sensor faucets usually shut off after about 10 frustrating seconds. Try filling a massive 2-liter plastic bottle 10 seconds at a time while standing in a busy, echoing public restroom. It feels like you are playing the world's most frustrating, humiliating video game while constantly looking over your shoulder. Hot water taps might look tempting to kill germs, but they are actually a dangerous hidden trap. Industrial water heater tanks slowly collect toxic sediment and heavy metals over time. This makes the warm water fine for washing dirty hands, but absolutely terrible for human consumption. Elias always sticks strictly to the freezing cold tap. Truck stops have become absolute gold mines in this underground homeless water network. They offer much longer bathroom access, incredibly deep sinks, and overnight staff who are generally too exhausted to judge anyone. But surviving this urban maze involves a highly complicated, invisible social math that Elias must calculate every single day. Linger too long in a bathroom, and you instantly look suspicious to the management. Move too fast, and you do not secure enough water to survive the freezing, unforgiving night. If you get permanently banned from a specific store, you lose a critical, life-saving resource forever. He is not just a homeless man, he is an urban phantom navigating a hostile corporate landscape. He knows exactly which manager will immediately call the police and which exhausted teenager working the night shift will look the other way. But what happens when the late-night restaurants close their heavy glass doors, the public bathrooms lock up, and the city goes completely dark? That is when the hunt for free, public water points becomes a dangerous, desperate game of cat and mouse. When the neon signs shut off and the city sleeps, Elias relies on a hidden, invisible map etched deeply into his mind. Decades ago, this country had hundreds of thousands of functioning public drinking fountains available to anyone. Today, most of them are bone dry, ripped out of the ground by cities claiming high maintenance costs and unfounded hygiene concerns. Even the modern, expensive bottle filling stations built in pristine public parks are locked tightly behind iron gates at night. They are closed off precisely when vulnerable people like Elias need them the absolute most. The average, comfortable citizen walks blindly past a dozen usable water sources every single day without ever noticing them. A rusted outdoor spigot hidden behind a closed, dark gas station. An unlocked exterior faucet sitting quietly in the cold shadow of a local church. To Elias, these forgotten, overlooked metal fixtures are sacred, life-saving lifelines. But when the man-made infrastructure completely fails, he must look up to the dark, stormy clouds. Harvesting rainwater in a toxic concrete jungle is practically a high-stakes mathematical art form. When the heavy wet season finally hits, desperate urban encampments instantly transform into highly efficient water collection stations. Elias meticulously rigs a standard blue plastic tarp at a precise, calculated angle between two chain-link fences. He funnels the cascading rainwater directly into heavy plastic buckets, empty milk cartons, and absolutely anything that can hold liquid. A basic 6x8-foot tarp, positioned with perfect geometry, can catch over 20 gallons of water during a single moderate storm. That is enough precious hydration to supply his entire hidden camp for nearly a full week. But the streets demand absolute perfection, and there is a deadly, unforgiving catch known as the first flush principle. The initial downpour aggressively washes all the toxic city smog, corrosive chemicals, and dangerous bird droppings right off the tarp's surface. If you blindly collect and drink that first wave of urban runoff, you will utterly destroy your digestive system. Elias waits patiently in the freezing rain, discarding the first 10 minutes of the storm before collecting the pure, clean water. He then runs this free rain through his homemade charcoal filter, creating a completely renewable $0 supply chain. And when the rain stops falling, Elias relies on the most fiercely guarded secrets of the homeless community. Hidden, natural groundwater springs still exist deep inside nearly every major sprawling metropolis. Hardened street veterans guard this geographical knowledge like buried treasure, passing it down only through highly trusted underground networks. Elias knows exactly which urban creeks flow crystal clear over safe rocks, and which murky, stagnant pools to avoid at all costs. He understands that a beautiful, bubbling stream is actually a flowing river of poison if there is an industrial chemical plant sitting just 1 mile upstream. Even then, he never takes a single drop of nature for granted. He religiously boils, filters, or solar purifies every single ounce, because invisible parasites like Giardia do not care how thirsty you are. Elias is not just existing on the fragile margins of modern society. He is an elite, masterful survivor, navigating a complex, hostile ecosystem, hiding right under our noses. Here at Primal Methods, we believe in mastering the raw, unfiltered truth of human survival. If you want to unlock more genius, life-saving strategies and uncover the hidden secrets of off-grid engineering, do not leave this page just yet. Hit that subscribe button right now, smash the like icon, and ring the notification bell to join our tribe. Stay sharp, stay prepared, and remember that with Primal Methods, true survival begins when you finally open your eyes to the world around you.